talking about, Theresa Tam, she should be fired. We're talking about, Trudeau's gun grab. I think we just need to dive right into these things and get the thought juices flowing. So I'm gonna let you start here. Actually, what I'll do is I'm gonna play this clip for everyone. This was a clip. I think you might have even brought this to my attention. Jill Colton. She did a video. It's about 6.5 minutes long, and basically she goes on about the whole Theresa Tam. The Theresa Tam scam. Is she really who she says? We can't figure it out. So I'll play this here. I'm going to play about 4 minutes or so of it. And then, we'll have a chat right after this.
I'm not sure with someone who is born in Hong Kong. Again, it is part of China, and that's a country famous for its international communist spies. So how has she ascended to the highest ranks of Canada's public health agency? Am I to believe we couldn't find a second, third, or even fifth generation Canadian to do this job? The risk of conflict of interest is always there. Do you think Tam would call for travel restrictions to her home country if needed? What about sanctions or an inquiry? I doubt she'd hesitate if Russia were to blame, but China? She might think of her family or extended family in that country first. That's why countries should be careful about who they put in charge. Some do, but not Canada. Tam also happens to work for the China-controlled World Health Organization and is really their mouthpiece. So it's nearly impossible for her to be impartial on China's handling of coronavirus and their apparent cover-up. When you add to the mixture that she's born in Hong Kong, you really have to wonder, where does her loyalty lie? Is her sole focus the health and well-being of Canadians above all else? It certainly doesn't feel like her interests are with protecting Canadians. I mean, she did disparage us by calling us racist and xenophobes back in January, when our citizens were telling the Canadian government to shut the border to prevent the spread of coronavirus. In January, Tam was actually on Twitter saying she was troubled by the growing number of reports of racist acts and comments on social media directed at people of Chinese and Asian descent, calling them unacceptable and very hurtful. Awfully sensitive. There's so many examples of Tam's disloyalty to Canadians and sheer incompetence, including the fact that Canada gathered supplies like N95 face masks to ship to China without recognizing that we might need those masks if the virus managed to spread to Canada, which Tam didn't seem to be too concerned about back in January. Do you think she would have given all that gear to the United States if they needed it? She also downplayed the risk to Canada. Quote, right now the cases are in China. Very few are exported. Yes, there's human-to-human transmission, but those are generally for close contacts. With regard to the severity of illness, there are some severe cases, but the deaths have occurred in older people with underlying medical conditions. With all of that pulled together, for the general public who have not been to China, the risk is low in Canada. She then opposed any travel bans because, well, her bosses at the WHO don't like them. And then she went back and forth in the media regarding face masks. Initially, she said they didn't work to prevent the spread. Quote, wearing masks when you're well is not an effective measure. Sometimes it can actually present some risks, as you're putting your fingers up and down on your face, removing your mask, and putting them next to your eyes. Then she reversed course when U.S. authorities said you should wear a face mask to help cut down the spread if you can't maintain appropriate social distancing and to cut down on transmission by Canadians who are infected but are asymptomatic. So we still have no clue if face masks work or not based on Tam's advice. How can this be such a confusing issue for a so-called expert? And don't get me started about the bunk model she forecasted on behalf of the World Health Organization that turned out to be mind-blowingly wrong, and that were the catalyst to shut down our nation's economy and stop people from working and trapping us in our houses. Everything she's done so far has been wrong or suspiciously stupid. How did someone so incompetent get to be in such a powerful position in Canada? The weird part is there's not much information about her online. I couldn't find much, so I started researching other sources that might have some info. They came up blank too, including this article on the website Euro-Canadian. The author writes, there is very little available on her biography, very little personal and even professional information on Tam. Somewhere there was a post that she was 55 years old, but I couldn't find her date of birth, her place of birth other than raised in Hong Kong, the dates of her various degrees. I even went to the UBC and UA websites looking for alumni profiles, and there are no listings of her thesis and dissertation. The author also couldn't find her medical school records to find her year of graduation or any other post-grad qualifications. Now, Wikipedia does state her birthplace as Hong Kong, but we actually have no clue when she became a Canadian citizen or even if she is one. The World Health Organization's international website lists her as an international expert on a number of WHO committees, including SARS, pandemic influenza, and polio eradication.
Wow. Jill really knows how to lay it down, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I think she did a great job of this. I mean, there's a lot of things in there that I'm sure a lot of us are asking the questions, right? As far as who is she? Why can't we find a lot of information about her on the internet? And where does she come from? I mean, I'll let you sort of, I guess, unpeel it. And I'll chime in.
It's very, the thing that disturbs me the most about the fact that we don't have a lot of good intel on Teresa Tam, or that, at the very least, her provenance. Like, if you're going to be running such a high-profile bureaucratic position in Canada, the Chief Medical Officer of Health is the top doctor in Canada. It's like a pork position, essentially. It's pork. It's like any other bureaucratic position. It's technocratic, but at the very least, your bio should be solid. And her bio's got more holes than Swiss cheese.
Absolutely.
And it's disturbing that, I think the thing that I found the most disturbing in the wake of watching Jill's clip the first time that I'd seen it was Canadians seem to be unable to rouse themselves at something that is so clearly malicious, something that is so clearly wrong about this picture. Like everything that Jill mentioned, and it's not a conspiracy theory, it's all facts there.
Absolutely.
And the Canadians don't seem to be too bothered by that. They're too busy trying to find out where the next so-called racist incident is in Canada. They're too busy trying to find out why people are not going to Chinese restaurants. You know, they're too busy trying to tweet about how much they're coming together, not in the good way, by the way. They're too busy trying to do stuff like that than really determine what exactly is going on with this Chief Medical Officer of Health. And why do people not want to admit the fact that her or him, as the case may be, we don't know, we'll call it its misinformation, led to the deaths of, what is the current count, I'm going to check right now, that's led to almost 3,000 casualties in Canada.
Absolutely.
And numbers today.
And while you're checking there, so I think what you're alluding to is obviously when this all came down the end of January, which we know now that they had this information end of December, even end of November, really, they had this information. And at that point, she's suggesting that, no, everything's fine, it's all good. The WHO says it's good. So that's our first flag right there. She followed lockstep with the WHO, right? Rather than looking at our own information within our own borders, no, we're going to take our, delve our information from the WHO. And I mean, just the flip-flopping on all this, masks, they're no good. They're not going to do anything. Don't wear, it's all false security if you wear gloves. Then we don't need to stop flights coming in from hotspots. That's fine. But yet you look at Taiwan right away, they close the borders, masks, good to go. Now all of a sudden we want masks, we're okay. But oh, by the way, did I mention we gave all the masks to China? And now I think we're trying to beg for some back, some inferior quality of some sorts. But these are kind of the measures, the virus doesn't see borders, but yet it does in our home, right? In our home we're protected, but the border won't protect you. So please, it's okay, let everybody in. It's just been a mismanaged bungle from the absolute beginning. They have no idea. The very first thing she actually suggested was there is no human-to-human transmission. Do you remember that, Adam?
I certainly do remember that. And again, and just to update you on the latest numbers,
yes, please do.
We're almost pushing 3,400 deaths in Canada from coronavirus, apparently.
Apparently, yeah.
And so her misinformation, or one could even call it disinformation.
Yeah.
Because you're even injecting information of any kind into the system, could to lead to these people's deaths to cause tragedy for families and people. Not to mention the numbers of medical professionals that have been exposed to this virus through the inadequate provisioning of PPE and personal protective equipment in all of our hospitals and stuff like that. This woman is responsible. There are too many question marks about this. We talked about this before.
Mm-hmm.
There's too many question marks about this woman. There's too many things that we don't know. There are too many pieces of information coming out in the media, whether it's the 2010 documentary about how she says that pandemic or epidemic people need to be tagged and bagged and walked away and pulled their own accord, and if people don't cooperate,
Actually,
they can be...
I'd like you to talk more about that there, or I'd like to kind of pause the conversation right there on that documentary. That was a vital piece of information. As we heard, what she wants to do is essentially track everyone. And if you're disobedient, you're going to go to jail. I mean, this is communist regime type of totalitarianism, right?